I'm just going to give everyone a minute to log on. I'm so psyched to have Alyssa Friedland here
I just
to
stepped away.
discuss, hello, the last summer at the Golden Hotel, like a perfect summer read. So I'm going to give it like 1 minute so everyone can join the call, and then we will get started. Cheers. I guess we should do a little toast.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers. I have a humongous glass of wine here. My husband just poured me, and welcome. I'm excited to
Nice,
talk about
nice.
this with you.
I am going to get started and start with a little intro about you as people are still coming on. And then I've got a bunch of questions. I loved this book. I think it is like the best kind of beach read. And after I ask my questions, people, if you have any questions at all, which I'm sure there'll be questions, just enter them in the chat or the Q&A, and I will check both, and I will ask Alyssa the questions. So a little intro about Alyssa Friedland. She's the author of 4 novels and a forthcoming picture book, which I want to ask you about. She attended Yale University, where she served as a managing editor of the Yale Daily News and is a graduate of Columbia Law School. She worked as an associate of a major firm before turning to writing full-time. Alyssa currently teaches creative writing at Yale and resides in New York City with her husband and 3 young children. I miss New York so much. Welcome, Alyssa. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I realize I don't know where you are.
Oh, I am 7 miles north of Boston. Like, I don't know if you know
Okay.
the subway system. It's like the last stop on the orange line. So,
Okay.
yeah, so a
Great.
little just north.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for coming on. So last summer at the Golden Hotel came out in May, and it's been huge, buzzy hit, and it was a Good Morning America buzz pick, a Skim Can't Miss pick, and a Book of the Month Club pick. So congratulations on that. That's amazing.
Thanks.
So why don't we start? Why don't you tell me about the inspiration for this book and the 2 families, the Goldman and Weingold families, and those are the 2 families that owned the Golden Hotel Resort. So tell me how you came up with this.
So it was really built off of the book that I had written prior, which is called The Floating Feldmans.
Right, right.
And so that was my third novel. And I would say that it's really the one where I felt like I found my footing as a writer and sort of my voice and also like what I wanted to keep doing, and obviously I
Yes.
want to write the exact same book over and over again, but I knew that like multiple point of view stories and family comedy, family dramedy is like sort of my specialty. And it's what I just enjoy doing the most.
Yes.
I think I am the best at that, compared to the other types of writing that I've tried, but also I'm just happiest when I'm doing it. So the Floating Feldmans was this multi generational family who were sort of dysfunctional and estranged, and they end up on a cruise ship together for a week. And you can imagine like how absurd, that situation was. So I loved it. And there was like heartfelt moments and funny moments and so much like, nah, like the sister hates the brother, but then you read the brother's chapter and you're like, oh, the brother really is right to hate the sister, and like getting everyone's perspective. So I loved doing the Floating Feldmans, writing it and going out into the world and talking about it with people. People really respond to dysfunctional family stories.
Oh, yes.
And, and then it just like makes them feel better about their own family. So I, sat down with my agent and my editor and I was like, okay, what's next? And everyone agreed that I should stick with like multi-generational family stories. And I was like, but I want to layer, what can
Yeah.
I do so that I build on the Floating Feldmans and that I challenge myself as a writer. And also I don't give people the exact same thing that they already had. So my
Right.
first idea was like, I want to do a family business because there's no family business in the Floating Feldmans. So they all are, of course, like they know each other, they're family, and they have financial stuff comes up, but not like day to day, running a business together. And I think family businesses are really fascinating.
Yes.
And my husband works in a family business, and it's like everyone's still speaking to each other, but it's complicated. And throughout my childhood, I saw families that work together, come to blows. And even if it didn't come to blows, it was like, this one's not treating this nephew right, and this child doesn't want to take it over,
The
and
drama. Yeah.
so much material. And then I was like pushing myself even further. I was like, okay, so I'm gonna have a family business, but let me even write more than just family. Let me also delve into friendship. And so it in my head, I was like, I'm gonna do a business that's co-owned by 2 families. So that'll just add, it'll let me explore issues of friendship and it will let me explore family businesses. and it'll be different enough than the Floating Feldmans, but still building on the themes that I enjoy writing about so much and talking to readers about
Yes.
so much. So then it was a question of what kind of business and where is it going to be? And I don't even exactly remember like the eureka moment, but I guess because I had enjoyed writing the cruise ship story and like love writing about vacation, I was like, oh, there's something like sort of glorious about a hotel. Like every, a story behind every floorboard and the quirky guests that, it just felt to me like a very rich setting.
Yes,
And then the
totally.
Catskills worked really well for the multi-generational aspect because I love to explore like the way that the generations interact and don't really understand each other. And so to like have a setting that was once like this golden era place, the see and be seen vacation spot, and now the grandchildren in their 20s are like wouldn't want to be caught dead there.
Right.
It lent itself to, it was the perfect setting to explore those issues.
So great. Yeah, I totally agreed. It's so rich and yeah, and I felt like I love books where the setting is almost like another character in the book, and I really felt that
Yeah.
with this one. So let's talk about the research you did for this story, like why you settled on the Catskills. I read some of your author's notes, and I'm particularly interested in your conversations with Bunny Grossinger. Is that her name?
Grosinger. Yeah. So
Grossinger.
Grossinger's is a real resort. Well, it's not, unfortunately, there are none left, but it was like among, if not the most prominent of the resorts, like certainly in the top three, like very elegant, glamorous resort. And it's actually Kellerman's from Dirty Dancing is based on Grossinger's.
Oh, it really
So,
was.
yeah,
Okay, I was wondering about that. All right, amazing.
a widely known fact. I mean, I'm sure they drew some inspiration from some of the neighboring hotels, but like Grossinger's was the source, of inspiration for Kellerman's. And by total happenstance, I was already writing this book and like well into my first draft. And I happened to meet Bunny Grossinger. She's something like 95 plus. And I met her at Pilates. And she had
Amazing. Yeah.
like also that like I am doing the same exercise as a 19-year-old like speaks
I love it.
it speaks either to like my laziness or her strength. I'm not sure which one. We'll just go with her strength.
Her
Okay.
strength. Pilates is not easy.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but like she's always there. And like I never late and I was always late. But she was there and we always had the same weekly appointment with different trainers. But I didn't know who she was. She was just like this very sweet older lady that would come in. And one time she didn't come and I asked my teacher like, oh, where's that older woman? And she's like, oh, she's not feeling well and she went to a doctor's appointment. But do you know who that is? And I was like, no, I
Oh.
have no idea. Like I knew her name was Bunny because like I've heard the teacher call her Bunny, but she's like, that's Bunny Grossinger of Grossinger's. Are you joking? Like I'm writing a book about the Catskills right
And
now.
you were already writing the book. That's
Halfway done,
incredible.
halfway done with the book. And I was like, do you think she'd be willing to talk to me? And she's like, I think so. She's like, but I'll ask. So like, it's not like we didn't text Bunny. She's 96, but like
Yeah,
maybe like 95 at the time, but
right.
left a message with like one of her grandchildren who reached out to her. And then lo and behold, I end up at her apartment. Turns out like she lives in the building that I used to live in.
Oh,
And
wow.
same apartment building as Bunny without even knowing it. And I went and I spent hours and hours with her. I visited her at least 3 times and I would always bring her flowers and
Oh,
she is sharp as a tack.
oh, that's amazing.
She
I
told me
love it.
I had to go back to page 1. I didn't rewrite my story, but I definitely layered in like a lot of her personal details. And she was like, use it all. Like it's all
Oh.
material. So, and she really, because her children, so she's a daughter-in-law of this woman, Jenny Grossinger, who, if you know the Catskills at all, Jenny is like the doyenne of the Catskills.
Okay.
And Bunny married her son, and Bunny raised her children going to Grossinger's. And it was like exactly like in my book, like where you're the little prince and princess of the hotel, like you're the owner brats, and
Right.
sounds like stealing from the kitchen and tormenting the bellman and all that stuff. And you play tricks on the guests. And that's really what her children's experience was like, going there every summer, every holiday, months at a time. So she was an amazing resource. And then other than that, my mom had spent every summer of her childhood going to the Catskills. Um,
Oh, okay.
so she stayed in bungalow colonies. And she told me when she read my first draft, she was like, it's really good. I love the story, but it's not salacious enough. A lot of stuff happened in the Catskills. She's like, you need more affairs. You need
Oh, I
like,
love it. That's so
like
great.
where's the drinking and where's the gambling problems and where's the where are the
More
affairs?
dirt. Yeah.
All the women were there all week long, and the husbands were in the city doing. I'm sure that's a whole other. That's
Oh,
my
I'm sure.
you know,
Yeah, that's
what
a
the husbands.
spin-off.
But the women were there, and like as you can imagine, and it wasn't like easy to spy on people. When you have a cell phone.
Right, right.
So she was like, go. So I had like Bunny giving me all the anecdotes about being in the owner family. And then had my mother being like, more sex.
Imagine your mom saying
I
that.
mean, she knows no boundaries. So it came as no surprise. But yeah, so I went back and layered in more sex and more scandal. And other than that, like my husband and I went to the Catskills for a long weekend and we drove around and we saw the sites of where these hotels used to be. We stayed in like sort of Catskills 2.0. It's like now kind of like a hipster. It has a hipster vibe now.
Okay.
Like that's really what I write about in my book is really happening. It's just not happening on a scale that can compare to what was once there in the golden era of the Catskills. There were thousands of hotels and
Oh,
bungalows.
were there really? I didn't realize there were that many.
Thousands.
Wow. Okay.
Thousands. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay. So in my head the whole time I had, of course, Dirty Dancing and Kellerman's Resort. And I love that you quoted Max Kellerman at the beginning. So were you also thinking about Dirty Dancing? Like, did that help influence you too? Or is it more Bunny influenced you the most? Or
I mean, Dirty Dancing is just like definitely in my top five, if not top three favorite movies. I would say like the storyline didn't impact me at all of what happens in Dirty Dancing, but it was great for like costume and setting
yes,
and just like and feeling like
feeling.
like the way like Dr. Hausman shows up and the way he's greeted by the owner and the way the bellmen know exactly where to bring his things because this isn't like a hotel you show up to once.
Right.
Everyone like once you get past that first summer like they know you like they know you want like a gin martini, not a vodka martini. And they know that you're going to tip the usher an extra $50 to get second row for the entertainment on Saturday. They know every guest is a waffle with nooks and crannies, and they know
Yeah, yeah.
all the drama. They know not to put the Cohens next to the Sugarmans in the dining hall because like they're not getting along. And it's that you can that comes through I think a
Yeah.
lot and it really comes through also in the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. If you saw this
Yes.
season, there are I think 3 or 4 episodes where they stay at the Steiner resort, like a fictitious resort, also very much like the Golden Hotel. And she's like Midge, her agent, like her booker, whatever, I forgot her name, is like, okay, I'm booking you for some summer shows. And she's like, I don't work in the summers. I'm going to the Catskills.
Right. Yeah. I loved those episodes there, and it reminded same vibe as like Dirty Dancing, and yeah, and the dresses. I mean, Mrs. Maisel's the costume designer.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love the
I know.
fashion. Oh, amazing, so
Yeah.
good. So I had never heard of the Borscht Belt before this book, and so what are the origins of that? Do you know? Like, I'm sure you know. So
I do know, but I had never tried borscht before. And actually, I'd already written the whole book and everything. And I was like, I think I should probably try borscht. And I even made borscht because I was like immersing myself in the book.
impressive.
I mean, borscht, it's an Eastern European beet soup, and it was like very commonly served. I think it's originally a Ukrainian recipe, and it was like so commonly served in this region, which had like very traditional Jewish foods. And because it was this area was so overwhelmingly Jewish, I don't know exactly when, maybe the 50s, maybe sometime in the 50s, possibly the early 60s, but I think I would say the 50s. It that was the name. Like it was
That
just
was the
given the
nickname.
name, the Borscht Belt. And,
I love it.
and the comedians who like very, very famous comedians and singers went up there and they were known as like the Borscht Belt entertainers.
Like Joan Rivers, right? Was one of
Joan
them?
Rivers, Jackie Mason, Rodney Dangerfield. I mean, the list goes on and on. And I mean, I remember Googling like who were some of the famous performers. It was like Eddie Fisher. I mean, everyone. Liz
Huge.
Taylor and Eddie Fisher got married at Grosinger's.
Oh no, I didn't know that. That's
Amazing.
crazy.
And they had top talent performing there. And to this day, like my parents will be like, "Oh, I love that comedian. Very Borscht Belt humor." You know, like a joke that was popular.
Oh, that's great. So the illustrations, well, I love the cover, first of all. I'll hold it up again for everyone to see if I can figure out where my camera angle is.
I got it. I got
There
you.
we go. The illustrations, I love the cover. I love the illustration of the resort that's on your website and that's also in here. And did you sketch that out or base it directly on one of the resorts you researched? Or is that just in your imagination?
It really came from my imagination, and the idea of putting in a resort map actually came from. I have a really good author friend named Catherine McKenzie, and she writes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really close with her, and I had just read her book. I mean, she's written so many, but this was "I'll Never Tell." Okay, and it was takes place at a sleepaway camp, and it's about a murder that took place at a sleepaway camp, and it was useful for her story to have her sleepaway camp mapped out because that was like part of figuring out the who done it is like who had the opportunity. Like if you were over at the canoes, but the murder happened, you know, like that was sort of part of it. But I also, besides the fact that it was like fun to look at the map and figure out, you know, what could have made sense, I loved it was beautiful. Like I just loved I loved the illustration and I loved being able to picture the camp sketched out like that. And I told her and she was like, you should have your hotel. Like she introduced me to this Canadian artist who's just an art student in, I think, Montreal. And I never met her. We just talked, you know, on the phone and over email. And I drew out, like, I can barely draw a stick figure, but I made, you know, like, I'm like pool here.
Yeah.
Here, you know, I mean, also like mine's not a murder mystery. So if like accidentally like tennis is too close to the pool, like it doesn't affect like the who done it, you know?
Right. It's more like fun.
It was more fun, you know? And then I'm really grateful. She also made the family trees.
Oh yeah, that's great.
And I have to say that so many people, like I'm on Instagram, like I love to go and like interact with the bookstagrammers and the people like who just write about my book. And they're like, oh, thank God for the family trees. I went back and looked at them a lot because there's so many characters to keep track of. And like, at first of all, I was really grateful we had the family trees because like, I don't, like for me, these characters are real people. So I'm like, what do you mean you couldn't keep track of them? Like, it's like forgetting your brother. Like, would you ever forget your brother's name? Like, would you ever forget your mother? But literally, like, it took me a while. Like the first comment, I was like, oh, not a careful reader. She couldn't keep track of who anyone was. Like she needed the family tree. But then by like the 10th time I saw the comment when people were like, thank God for those family trees. They were really useful. I was like, thank God we put them in.
Oh, I love them. Yeah, they were useful. I looked back a couple times. I really liked them.
I put them in because I thought they would look pretty. I already had the artists lined up for drawing out the hotel. So I had the artist lined up. So I'm like, throw in the family trees. And also it's like a family tree is an amazing symbol of like a story that's very intergenerational.
Interwoven, intergenerational.
Yes,
yeah,
like
exactly.
Trees, sunrise, sunset, it all makes sense. Meanwhile, I'm like, well, thank God they were there because everyone would have just probably like thrown the book in the fire, you know, if they had.
No, I don't think that.
But to me, I'm telling you, like these people in my book are like, they are so real to me that, you know, I'm like, how does anyone forget who Zach is? You know?
So this totally goes to my next question, actually, which works out so well. So I was so impressed because it's an intergenerational story. It's told from multiple points of view. Like a character it's from a different character's point of view for each chapter in the book. And each character has a really distinct voice. And I am so curious about your writing process and how did you do it? Like that, it was so impressive. I love that.
Thank you. Well, you know, I had already done this for the Floating Feldmans. This is my second time trying, you know, writing a young horny boy who's like, that kid was 16, this kid's 22. They're still young and horny and stupid. And
Right,
I've
right.
already written like grandparents, and I don't know. I think that's like what makes me a decent writer. Like I think naturally as a person, I have many flaws. What a flaw I don't have is lack of empathy. I have a lot of empathy for people, and I think because I am so
That'll
empathetic,
come back. 1 second.
like to almost empathic levels, like I don't have that hard of a time channeling people that are very different than me. And so if I'm in a Maddie chapter, I'm Maddie. And
Yeah.
if I'm Louise, suddenly, and I'm someone who like doesn't wear makeup and goes out of the house with like my hair messy, but Louise is the opposite. But when I'm in a Louise chapter, I'm Louise. I'm the older woman that would never ever like not have her handbag match her shoes. And I become Louise. And then I'm sick of Louise, and I'm like, great, now I get to be Zach, and I get to be like the dopey kid who had to go to college extra years to graduate and has no idea what he's doing with his life. And I just I don't find I have so much curiosity about other people, and I do like really have a tremendous amount of empathy, like almost to a flaw. And I think that I understand people different than me, to like maybe a slightly more attuned level than like
Yeah.
someone else.
No, that's totally comes through in the story. And so tell me about your actual process. I mean, in writing, for people that don't know, there's plotters versus pantsers, people who plot things out like in detail and people who just sit down and start writing. And so which one are you?
I'm a pantser.
Amazing.
I
That's so
don't,
impressive. I'm total plotter. So I like every time I talk to someone, they're like, you just sit down and you just do your thing. That's
and because as you said before, I also teach novel writing, and I tell my students, like, of course, I have multiple goals for them. By the end of the semester, there are several things I want them to have figured out about themselves as writers and to improve. But probably the first thing I say to my students is that by the end of the semester, I want you to know who you are. Are you a plotter or are you a pantser? Because you're one or the other.
yeah,
You're rarely both,
I agree.
and I want you to try both. They write long papers, long creative writing pieces for my class, and I encourage them to try both or just see what comes naturally when they do first sit down. I'm like, because if you could just, it seems almost like, how do you write a 350-page book without an outline? I think naturally a non-seasoned new writer like the ones I teach would assume that outlining is like the only way to go. But then there are people like me who think like, how could I possibly attack a book without an outline? But then the minute I tried to sit down to do an outline, I froze. I have never had a single good idea when I've tried to outline. It's
Really?
actually hard for me because my publisher, like I'm at the point now, when I sold my first book, I had the whole book done because that's the way it works when you're
Yes,
selling
yeah.
a novel. But now I sell, on outlines, but I don't do outlines. So basically, my agent, I'm like, I shouldn't be saying this out loud. Hopefully, my editor is on the call. Like, I talk to her and I'm like,
Fine.
like, look, it'll be about like family and stuff and things will happen. And it'll be really funny, but also people will cry. And she just looks at me and she's like, give me 24 hours. Okay. The outline.
Nice.
I get a book deal. I never look at what she did and move on.
And you just go.
Because like my editor and her boss, I'm like, it's hard to be like, I got this, don't worry,
Right,
like,
right.
something from you. And I'm like, okay, so now I just have my little secret deal. My agent makes a killer outline that I never look at, and we all just pretend
And
that
it
that
works. And
happened.
it's what, like you said, it's whatever works for you and your process is what works. And
And
you
I don't,
totally have a track record now. And so, yeah.
and based on like like yeah, like it's amazing. Like I have a ton of author friends now. When I started, I was like had no author friends. Now I have a lot. Like I see no quality difference. Like when I look at like people who tell me they're plotters versus
I
pan,
agree.
I don't think that the plotters books are always better because they're well thought out in advance, and I don't think that the pantsers books are necessarily better because they're caught up, they're excited, and the spirit of the moment takes them to a more creative place. Like it's really just who you are as a writer and what works for you. And so like that's something like for my students, it's so important to me that like if you learn nothing else in my class, figure out which of those you are.
Yeah, I completely agree. So interesting. So, um, some of the parts of this book are so funny, and you describe it as a dramedy, and there's funny, sarcastic, and I think writing humor can be hard. And so, like, how do you get into that? Is it just like you get into the character's voice and it comes, or because I feel like it's hard to do well, and you did it really well in this book. It's yeah, there's some
Yeah.
really like laugh out loud funny lines. So
Oh, you know, so we talked,
and scenarios. Yeah.
and that's like to me the best compliment. Like when people
Oh,
are
thank
like, when I sometimes I'm like with people and I see them reading, you know, my book, like if I'm like with a friend for the weekend and she's like, oh, I'm gonna read your book this weekend. And she, when I hear my friend start laughing on the couch, I'm like,
Oh,
you're not faking that, you know,
yeah.
like it's genuine. Like, oh, what part are you at? And then I start laughing. Like, but I don't find it that difficult to write humor. I think it's like, again, like with the plotter versus pantser, it's like who you are.
Yes.
Whereas like a book like a domestic suspense or a thriller and a whodunit, to me that is basically like asking me to write an entire, you know, television treatment in Swedish. Like I could never do it. Like my husband sometimes like all the money seems to be in thrillers. Maybe you want to give that a go. I'm like, no, because we would
Yeah.
like it would be the worst thriller ever. You know, I have no ability to do that. I do have an ability to write humor. And I think that like I did go hear the Rachel Brosnahan speak, and she's so funny as Midge Maisel. And when I heard her speak at the 92nd Street Y near where I live, she's like, I'm not funny at all. Like I don't like
Really.
that. I don't make jokes. No one would ever describe me as funny. And she's like so funny as Midge. So that's not like I am often described as funny and like laugh a ton and I find a lot of things funny. Like humor is a very big part of my daily life and my interactions with my friends, with my family, with my children. So it's like it's a natural extension of me and a lot of things make me laugh. Like hard. Like I have many memories of like milk coming out of my nose and you know, like I find a lot of things funny and I love to crack jokes. And so I and translating that into like the written word, it's probably like it's like timing. It's like the way a comedian has to just like
Yes. Very much so. I agree. Yeah. And yeah. Like my daughter, we say like when the writing is like tight and snappy, and like the one-liners or like the moments. Yeah. And you
and you
yeah,
just
and I like
have
you
to
said,
wait for it.
this gives you joy at like this type of writing and it comes through. So
Yeah. I think it's like just the more practice and if you read it out loud, you start to feel like this is a moment where like some levity would be great, you know,
yeah.
or
Yeah, balancing it out a little bit and
even just like that the syntax of the sentence has to work with the joke, you know, it's all
yes. Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you a couple questions that I get a lot because I'm just always curious what other writers think. So, I'm often asked, do you have trouble letting go of the characters after you're finished with the book?
I get confused. I would say like I don't feel sad. I think I feel like really relieved when I'm done. It's like I'm pretty anxious and like when I'm writing and I feel nervous. I like did I write enough today? Is it good? And so when the book is like done and out in the world, I don't have a hard time letting go of the characters because I'm just so relieved that
Yes.
it's done and I'm ready to move on. I would say that I get confused when I start my next book because, especially if there's like any parallels in the characters, you know? So then I sometimes have to keep being like, that's like Amy, who's whatever. Amy is, you know, she's the middle generation in the Goldman side of the family. And like, she's very similar demographically to the stars of my next novel,
Okay.
age and sort of stage of life and every, you know, and I'm like, I have to keep her. I'm like, that's, and one of their characters in particular, it's like, I was like also a white Jewish woman. I'm like, not Amy, not Amy. Like
Right, right.
sometimes even say Amy. And I have to be like, this is Melissa now. We're done with Amy. This is Melissa.
Right. Put her aside and yeah, yeah. Um, and another question I get is, so what is your favorite part of the writing process and what is the part you dread, if any? Like what?
I dread all of it.
I hear you.
The whole entire thing is nauseating. Nervous. I mean, I guess like right now, the book I'm writing right now on my first draft, I'm almost done with the first draft, maybe 4 chapters left. And I feel like excited, even so much of it is garbage and I'm gonna have so much editing work to do. There's like a feeling of like writing the words the end, you know,
Uh,
even if it's a first draft, that like that feels really good. But
the
probably
best.
my favorite part of writing is when I'm at the stage where I go sentence by sentence and I tighten every sentence and I elevate the language because I'm like
Mm-hmm.
a dork. And so I'm very happy to like dive into the intricacies of each paragraph and just elevate the writing. Like
Yes.
if it's like a ninth grader writing, like I want to bring it to a senior in high school, you know, like I want to,
Yep.
it's really just like an elevation. My most dreaded is our edits of a different nature, like edits where like my editor or a friend who reads it is like, the plot line with XYZ has to go. And then I use this a lot, like when I'm interviewed, like it's a Jenga tower collapsing. I'm like,
Oh, that's a really good analogy, though. Yeah.
but if I get rid of Michael, then my entire tower just collapsed.
Right.
I get very confused also with like timing changes. Like if they, I'll get a comment from my editor, like,
Uh,
I really enjoyed the scene where all the friends met up at the restaurant and the big fight happened. But I really think that should have happened in the first third of the book and you had it in the end. I'm like, nausea overtakes.
uh,
Like,
yes, I know those macro change. I always say it's like pulling a thread, and then if you change it, then everything like, yeah,
you do thread, I do Jenga, but
yeah, it's painful. Yeah, I totally agree.
I get physically ill. Like even having multiple documents open, like if I cut it and then I'm like, it's good material. So then I paste it into another document, knowing that I have to move it to the front of the book.
Yeah.
But then that whole scene has people that we haven't met yet in the book.
Uh, yes.
And
I'm feeling this so much. Yeah.
like really nauseating to even talk about. We need to
Yeah,
move
yeah.
on.
Well, we'll move on. I have one more question, and then I'm gonna take questions from the audience. People have such nice comments. A lot of people love the family tree. I want to tell you that. And so last question, and then like I said, we'll take questions. So if the people have questions, put them in the chat window or in the Q&A. I'll look at both. So so you teach this writing class at Yale, and so what is some of the best advice you give your students about writing a novel?
Read.
Yes.
Just read. I mean, it's like such a simple and maybe a little bit of like a cliche answer, but I say read as much as you can and read widely.
Mm-hmm.
Read out of your genre. If you want to write realistic fiction, which is what I write, pick up a sci-fi book, like pick up a genre, pick up a romance book, pick up a YA book. Like there's so much to learn if you step out of your comfort zone and like, or pick up a thriller, you know. I say to read widely, read extensively. I think I've probably, with the exception of like some rare pieces of garbage that I've read, which is unusual, like I've probably picked up something from every single book that I've written.
Agree. Yeah.
It could be
So true.
a word that I fell in love with, and I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
like the way that sounds. I like the way it sounds in my head when I read it. So like a, you know, like I just like one of the books I read with my students is A Visit from the Goon Squad, um,
Ah,
Regan, which is like a great teaching tool, a great book, and a really great teaching tool. And she plays around so much with point of view, not just like having multiple characters, but also like first person chapters and second person chapters and third person chapters. And I think if I hadn't just reread that with my students, it wouldn't have occurred to me in the book I'm writing now that I have 4 main characters and 3 of them are told in third person, which is the way I write traditionally. But this one character, and when you read the book, you'll see why. Like there's one character, like when we finally hear her voice, she's first person.
okay.
Like Jennifer Egan can do it, you know, not that I have her skill level, but you know, it works. Like she showed me that you can blend first person with third person and if the reader is engaged in the story
It works. Yeah.
they don't feel thrown out or confused. It's just a subtle thing that deepens the connection to the book, you know, that makes the chapter hit that much harder because it's told in a certain point of view that works better for that character or chapter. So And so now I'm writing a first person chapter in my book, and I've never written in first person before, but it works. And I was definitely inspired by Egan and by focusing on that a lot with my students. So just read, read, read.
Totally agree. And so before I take questions, tell us about you have another book coming out next summer, and so tell us about that book before I jump in.
So it's coming out. Actually, it'll be my first time not a summer book, but it'll be coming out in the fall, in September. It's called Most Likely, and it's about 4 women who are friends since high school. They're scattered across the country now, but they're still friends and they're still in touch. And 3 of the 4 of them reunite at their 25th high school reunion, and they are definitely surprised with where some of their classmates are and where some of their classmates aren't, and some crazy things happen at the reunion, and kind of leads them in a very intoxicated state to pull out their yearbook, and they stumble on their senior superlatives, and it's a real moment of like, what the are we doing with our lives? Like,
oh wow, okay,
not where we thought we would be 25 years out of high school. And the 3 friends who are there make a pact to try to fulfill their dreams. But needless to say, when you're 43 years old and you decide to upend your life and like take on massive goals, it doesn't go smoothly. And then, of course, which I won't reveal, but the 4th friend really comes into the story in a big way as well. So I would say it's like a lot about exploring, of course, friendship, but even more than friendship, I would say it's like really turning the concept that a woman can have it all or should even try to have it all. It's trying to turn that on its head and really explore how difficult it is for a woman to have like a very multifaceted life. And my 4 main characters are like totally different. Some have children, some don't have children, some are married, some are divorced. Like they're all the same age and they all went to the same high school, but that's where the similarities stop. And for all of them with their different goals, it's impossible.
I love the premise. And that's next summer, next July. Did it say in the book?
September.
Oh, yeah, September. Okay.
It said July, but then I called my editor and was like, about that July.
Right.
So now September.
And that's the one you're currently working on that you were just talking about.
I'm working on it right now.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so questions. Let's see. Sharon Person asks, would you ever write a sequel to this novel? A lot was going on with everyone, so you could just keep going.
Someone asked me the other day to do a prequel, and I
that's a good idea.
That was really appealing. So I think I'd maybe even like, I don't know, this would be a tough sell to my editor, but even like half the book's a prequel and half the book's a sequel or something. So I don't want to reveal what happens at the end of The Golden Hotel, but for those of you who have already read it, what I would focus on in the sequel. And the prequel would be the hotel in its heyday.
Yeah.
When gossip, when all that juicy, salacious stuff my mom was talking about.
Right. A couple people say, "Oh, I vote for the prequel," but only for the salaciousness.
I'm not a historical, I did research for this, but I, was of a limited nature because the book takes place in 2019. But, I certainly would enjoy a deeper dive into the Borscht Belt. And I think a prequel would be a lot of fun. So maybe it would be really cool to go back and see Louise in her prime.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, this is a good question. I was wondering about this too. Carol Hockman asks, who stayed in the cottages and who stayed in the hotel and what were the differences? And she also loved the family trees. So
the cottages were for like the longer term guests who came like weeks at a time, because some of the places in the Catskills in real life were like bungalow colonies, all cottages, and then hotel, all hotel. And then there were some that were hybrids. And so you had a place where like if you were going to do a 6-week stay, you had like a more of a mini home. And of course the owners had cottages.
Okay. Let's see, what are you working on now? We already had that. And that one's a spoiler, so I'm not going to ask that one because we don't want to spoil it for anyone. A couple of people just finished it and loved it. And our friend Rochelle Weinstein, our mutual friend, is here and says, that's so nice. Marlene asks, do you have a favorite genre that you like to read in?
A realistic fiction, I would say.
Yeah.
very like what my class is called contemporary novel writing. It's what I like to read the most. It's what I like to write. So, just realistic things that like constantly make me feel like I can identify with the situations or the characters.
And here's another good question. EVS, did Bunny read the draft?
Oh, she didn't read the draft, but she got many copies of the book. I
I'll bet she did.
was offered her, but she's not really well anymore,
Oh
unfortunately.
yeah. Yeah. Well, she's up there, but I mean, what a gift. I love stories like that. It's almost like it was fated,
Yeah.
that you met her. That's so amazing. Um, let's see. Oh, I just see. I think I got most of the questions. Oh, what are you reading now this summer? What are you reading right now?
Right now, I'm in the middle of Malibu Rising,
Oh
and
yeah, is that good? I'm sure it's good.
getting it.
Yeah.
A lot of characters also, and no family tree for main characters, but then there are a ton of ancillary characters. And this is like interesting. She's in everybody's head in the book, so it's like a very omniscient narrator, which I like. And my next 5 books are going to be books that I was asked to blurb.
Oh,
So
I got a few of those right now too. Yeah, yeah.
that'll be 5. And then I want to read Morningside Heights by Joshua Henkin, which looks really good. I mean, my to be read is really intimidating.
It's long. I know. I feel the same way, and I like so many books, not enough time. I've been trying to listen more on Audible too, to kind of like get through more books. And I love Julia Whalen, by the way. She's such an amazing narrator. That's awesome that you had her.
I would, oh my God, she's amazing. And there's some like audiobook magazine that just came out and they reviewed her narration of my book. And it was the
Uh,
most glowing review of like how she breathed so much life into 12 characters who all.
yes. I don't know how I mean, she's I think one of the best that there is, and I don't know how these people do it. It's such a gift, and it's so great that you got her, because I'm sure she did a beautiful job. I read this one. I didn't listen to it, but I'm sure.
Right now I'm listening to a Julia Whalen narration, The Invisible Life of Addie Larue.
Oh, I read that with my daughter. Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. And so I'm listening to her and she's amazing. I mean, I didn't pick it for that reason, but she's doing a beautiful job. Oh,
Oh, yeah. No, it's funny when you were talking about you take different things from different books that you read. I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and some of the writing is just so gorgeous, like the descriptions.
the descriptions. That's the
Oh,
thing. It's like I don't write stories like that at all, but the way that
oh,
like will describe like the color of an eye or like the sounds in the subway. I'm like,
oh, just beautiful,
I would have
beautiful.
thought of that.
Yeah, so impressive. Yeah, we loved reading that one. Mindy asked, who was the author of Morningside Heights?
Oh, Joshua Henkin.
Joshua Henkin. Um, Oh, and Carol Hoffman says Julia Whalen does an interview with Kristen Hanna at the end of The Four Winds and explains some of what she does, and it's fascinating. Very
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
So I think it's a good time to wrap up. How can readers best keep in touch with you? What do you prefer?
I think Instagram is the you'll certainly find me there the most often. I'm on Facebook, but not nearly as much as I'm on Instagram. So it's just at Alyssa Friedland. That's
Okay,
it. Just
okay,
a very easy handle. And I do post a lot and talk about my work, my family. It definitely has like a very humorous bent, my Instagram, I think. And I do
nice.
giveaways and recommend books. And it's your standard author fare, I would say, but with my voice and my style. So Instagram is a great way, and I hope to connect with you guys on it
Excellent. Do you ever Zoom with book clubs or anything?
all the time.
All the time. Okay, so remember that. She Zooms with book clubs too. Yeah,
Yeah,
I do a lot of that too.
yeah, which is so fun. How old are your kids? Oh, what are they doing? Annoy me. My kids are 13, 11, and 7. Um,
Oh,
I don't really write when they're around, not because like I feel bad. Like I do other stuff. I'm like on my email or I'm texting my friends. Like
yeah, yeah,
I can only really write for like an hour and a half a day. I
yeah.
can't work and whether that's like marketing or even brainstorming and like doing a lot of like interacting on Instagram with readers. Like I'm working, I'm planning events and like talking
Yes.
to clubs and this and that, but like original writing, like maybe 2 hours a day top. So I do it when they're in school. And
That's
right,
what I do too. And I find I just need the quiet focus. I can do other administrative stuff anytime, but yeah, I need the quiet.
I do it when they're at school. And I happen to have all three of them away in sleepaway camp right now.
Oh, wow. Good for you. Vacation. Enjoy. Well, thank you so much for being on. This is amazing. Last time we're at the Golden Hotel, and it's great. I don't know. I will figure out this like camera angle. But great summer read, and people have many kind words in the comments. I'm sure you'll see, and I will. I'll post this to YouTube.
Secret
What's
Stealers on sale.
Secret Stealers is on sale this month. That's right. For those of you who don't know, it's
No.
on Kindle. Thank you for sharing that. And my next historical happy hour is July 29th with Mark Sullivan, who wrote the Last Green Valley, and he shares a publisher with me. So you can sign up for that on my website. But thank you again, Alyssa. I really appreciate the time, and thank you everyone who came on tonight. You're all amazing and awesome, and so kind with your comments.
Instagram, I hope.
Yes, see you on Instagram. Thank you. Take care. Have a great summer.
Thank you.